welcome everybody to another summer of cyber education with Raices Cyber. I'm glad to see some people here, even though our cyber papa is missing today. Today we're having a session with Brian Pendleton. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And
Close
he's
enough.
gonna, yeah, and he's gonna be talking about how artificial intelligence is not going to replace you. So I'm gonna hand it off to you, Brian.
Okay. Thank you. Uh, as he said, my name is Brian Pendleton. I am currently trying to finalize my dissertation, although I have successfully defended it and received my degree as a doctor in cybersecurity. I'm trying to make the last little changes necessary to make my committee happy so I can publish. I also currently work at Deloitte in consulting on the commercial side. So I do work with Salesforce there. Even though I'm slowly making a transition over into some data science positions. Let me go ahead and cut over here. So, the talk today is AI will not replace you. And I hope that I can get that across well. The thing that is important to notice about this is I think we hear so much talk from marketing people, from a lot of people on Twitter or social media, about how we're making all these advances in AI, and pretty soon, especially in the cybersecurity realm, we'll be able to replace the Knox and replace the SOCs, and maybe even have it do all threat intelligence, and it, we are a long way off from that, and hopefully I will get that across to you. So I'm going to start off here. And one of the things, that I kind of like to start off with when I'm talking about AI is, that first scene when Morpheus and Neo meet. He's taken the red pill, if I remember right, and now they're in the construct, and Morpheus, they're talking about what reality really is, that the Matrix isn't a reality. And he says, the only thing that we know for certain is that at some point in the early 21st century, all of mankind was united in celebration. We marveled at our own magnificence as we gave birth to AI. And Neo looks at him and kind of says AI, and then goes, "You mean artificial intelligence?" And I always like that because I feel that's the way that we are right now. If you take a look at AI Twitter or just about anything that on business shows, or if you follow cybersecurity news, everyone's AI this and AI that, and we are so proud that oh my gosh, take a look at Dolly. We can create these models that can create a picture out of nothing. You just put in a few words, and we don't really get told what's happening behind the scene, and we're not told how limited these things really are. We just marvel at the fact that we can do this stuff, and start saying that this is the future, and the future is now. So one of the first things are I actually should have put in a slide here on what I'm going to do. Talk to me, or I'm going to tell you.
You disconnected for a bit.
I disconnected?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on.
There we go. Now I can see you again.
All right, great. So what I want to do is go over what is artificial intelligence, and this is where we're going to get a little bit interactive because I want to know what you guys think. Um, so let's start off. What is artificial intelligence? So we've got artificial, and these two definitions were the first definitions that came up when I Googled, right? So, how do we define artificial? Made or produced by humans rather than occurring naturally. And then, how do we define intelligence? The ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. What do you guys think about that? Is that do those make sense to you? Would you agree with those definitions? I saw somebody came off mic or
Yeah,
came off mute.
sorry. Yeah, actually, I would agree with those terms, to be honest. That definition. It,
Okay,
yeah.
so if we agree with those, then let's move on and put them together. So, what is artificial intelligence? Well, it's hard. In academia, it's not exactly a contested concept, but it's very close to it. And a contested concept means that we can't define it or that people use their own definitions. And of course, that makes things really hard, right? If we can't define something, how do we really understand it or how do we communicate it? And you'll see that AI, the definition has really evolved as we've worked with it. And so McCarthy, back in the first days of the very first AI conference, called it the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. But that doesn't really help us, right? And when you put the same word within used in a definition, that doesn't help us either. Artificial intelligence making an intelligent machine, well, you've got kind of a circular definition there. So a little bit later, and of course there have been many different definitions as we've evolved in this field, but 2004, this was a good one for about that time. The study of how to make computers do things at which the moment people do better. Well, is that a really good definition? Are we just trying to find things that a computer doesn't do well and eventually can do at the same or even better than people? Because let's say 2004, and here's one of the reasons why I picked this. Think of Microsoft Office in early 2000s if you were using it. Well, Excel could calculate things faster than humans. Word picked up errors better than humans. So were they artificially intelligent? Or were they just following instructions that we had built into the programs? Later on, we get Berente saying machines performing the cognitive functions typically associated with humans, right? So, what does that mean? Well, he gives some things there, but cognitive functions really then takes away robotics to some degree, at least in theory, because the robots that we use in say car manufacturing, they're just following a program as well, right? But they have replaced humans in doing some of the functions because they can do it at a higher skill level, right? Or actually, I shouldn't say skill level, I should say with a lower degree of error, right? So we still don't have a really good definition of what artificial intelligence is. Well, let me ask the audience. Do any of those sit well with you, or do you have a different idea?
Yeah, I agree with you. We don't have a good definition for artificial intelligence. I think because It's something that is being developed as of right now, and we can give a definition to something that hasn't matured yet. That's what I believe.
Yep, and I'm kind of with you on that. You know, as the field keeps developing, things change so much, sometimes very quickly, that it's hard to even if you can make a definition, that definition may be out of date. 6 months later, and I will get back to the idea of intelligence. Intelligence is what's considered a contested concept in academia. We can't really define intelligence. There's so many different ways of taking a look at intelligence that back in, say, 55, whenever they first created this and said making intelligent machines, well, intelligence was really defined by knowledge, speed of recall, the ability to do tests. But now we know there's so many different ways of showing intelligence that doesn't count. However, I would say that, through science fiction and movies, people really have an idea of artificial intelligence from the 60s and 70s and 80s, right? A lot of times you'll say, ask somebody, what do you think artificial intelligence is? And they'll say, oh, C-3PO or HAL from oh no, I can't. 2001: A Space Odyssey, or Her from the movie Her. So they think of it in terms of Hollywood instead of what's really out there. So just to kind of clear it up, or not clear it up, but to go the way the government has defined it broadly, any artificial system that performs tasks under varying unpredictable circumstances without significant human oversight. So I didn't read the last part because that's the part where we fail today. And that is why AI, for the foreseeable future, will not take your jobs. Because AI, and I'll show you in a little bit, really can't learn from experience the way that a human can. And until it can, we'll always need to be in the loop. And even then, we will have, it will be necessary for us to be in there until not only can they learn from an experience, but develop ethics. And we are very far from us being able to really make sure that these models are ethical. And a reason for that is exactly the same as intelligence. When you talk about ethics, different cultures look at things differently. Different countries have different ethics. So it's really hard to say, well, how should we actually make these models ethical? And part of that comes into, well, where are you going to use this model? What country? What region of a country? That all changes. So what is artificial intelligence? Well, it's not just one thing. It is made up of a bunch of, it's a field of its own, but it's made up of a bunch of different subfields. We've got machine learning is the most important one. And then under machine learning, there's deep learning and neural networks. And I point those out because today, a lot of the advances that we've made are through the use of deep learning and neural networks, and those advances are are what we've used to make better things like Tesla's self-driving tool, Siri, Alexa, anything that can respond to natural language really owes that ability to deep learning and neural networks. However, contrary to what you'll see on the news, on, again, on cybersecurity sites, deep learning and neural networks are not the most prevalent form of machine learning. And I'll get to that in a minute. So computer vision, being facial recognition, really OCR, optical character recognition, that type of thing. Robotics is considered a subfield of artificial intelligence. And then, like I said, natural language processing. And all of these kind of work together to create this field AI. But again, you have to remember, without machine learning, the rest of them don't work. So that's the basis of our artificial intelligence today. So how does it learn? Obviously, machine learning. That's the way that that's why it's called machine learning. And there's really 3 major types, but I always like to throw in a 4th just because it is out there. So supervised learning. And what that is taking data and feeding it to an algorithm and having that algorithm try to learn how that data is classified, typically classified. So with supervised learning, the type of questions that you're answering are usually a yes or no, or a classification that's 3, maybe 4. You don't want to go into big classifications. So, it's is this spam? Is this not spam? Should I give this person a loan? Should I not? Should we declare that it's going to rain today or it's not? So one of the things about supervised learning takes data, but typically humans have to go in and make sure that each data point is labeled so that when the algorithm is learning, it knows whether it's a yes or a no. Unsupervised learning is, we don't want to take the time to label it. Basically, we run an algorithm and we cluster the data, and then we try to figure out, well, okay, the algorithm has clustered this data. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to label each of these clusters? And then we have semi-supervised, which what that is typically we've got data that we don't want to take the time to label because it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. And so we let a unsupervised algorithm cluster things for us. We label that, and then we feed that data into a supervised model so that we can get better questions or get better answers for our model. The last one is reinforcement learning. Has anyone here heard about like Deep Blue or AlphaGo? Sorry, I'm looking over here to see if I notice anyone.
Deep Blue kind of rings a bell on my head, but I don't remember exactly now.
Yeah, so Deep Blue played chess and beat the grandmasters in chess. AlphaGo was a model. Yeah. The Deep Blue also then played Jeopardy a little bit later and was beating Jeopardy champs. AlphaGo was a model that was trained to learn the game Go, which is considered the hardest game to learn because there's so many different possible combinations of moves, and it has learned how to do that, and it regularly beats the best human Go champions. And they use reinforcement learning. And basically in reinforcement learning, you don't give a model information, you just give it the rules of a game or whatever you're trying to learn, and then it has a reward function. So if it makes a move that is a good move, it gets a reward. And then when it makes bad moves, it takes a penalty. And so it learns through that reward function what it should actually do. and it can take, a lot of iterations to learn. But today, because of our computing power, we can run a model through a billion different iterations so that it can learn really quickly. So the most important thing, though, is all of these take some data. It all has to be cleaned. So I don't know if any of you have worked like with databases. Clean data is one of the most important things in the world. And when garbage in, garbage out, right? It's the same thing with a model. You have to make sure that everything is cleaned, that it is the correct data for the problem that you're trying to solve. And if you're going to be using supervised learning, you have to classify that ahead of time, because the model learns based upon the classification that you've placed for each data point. And we've got to do it before we can begin training. So I want to stop there for just a minute and ask if anyone's got any questions so far. I didn't want this to be like a full-on AI course, but I think it's important that you know some basics before we get to the part that I really want to get to. So I want to make sure that everyone's, on board with what we've gone over so far. And if there's any questions, I can answer.
There doesn't seem to be any
Okay.
questions. I just see in the chat they were talking about how AI will never replace help desk, because the humans mostly will be want to talk to another human. And Kev mentioned how we wouldn't want a robot resetting up someone's password. And I kind of agree with him, because as a pen tester, I see that as a huge security issue.
Yeah, and that's, we'll get to it a little bit, but we definitely, it's not because AI is going to take over the world. It's not Terminator, it's not Skynet. That's not going to happen. But just like humans make mistakes, humans train these models. And you'll notice I keep saying model. Maybe I should take a step back for just a second and tell you. So there is no such thing as AI. So when you talk to Siri, when you talk to Alexa, or OK Google, there is not an intelligence that is responding to you. There is a model that has been trained that is responding, and it's responding based on a statistical certainty about what you said or what you entered into a search bar or something. So it does its best to respond in the way that it should. So we talk about models and agents more than AI. And that's really something that is important, because when you hear AI out in the world, I mean, you should kind of just automatically tell yourself machine learning or model. At some point, we may have an AI, but we are years away from it, unless we just make some incredible breakthrough that no one really foresees in the next 20 years or so. And even that, I'm going to tell you, there's a little joke in the AI community. Every time somebody says, well, when are we going to have a true AI? Since 1955, the answer has always been in 20 years. So, that it's just to continue the joke. It's always, yep, it's going to be in 20 years. That's when we'll have a real AI. But in reality, we don't know. So, sorry if anybody gets offended, but this is one of the things that we just really hammers home. So, machine learning doesn't really learn. It mimics, just like a parrot. So a parrot can learn random phrases. Well, guess what? An algorithm can too. And a parrot doesn't understand anything about those phrases. And guess what? Neither does a model. And occasionally the parrot will take all of those phrases that it knows and puts them together in a really weird way. And you're like, what? Well, guess what? A model will sometimes do that as well. But at least a parrot is cute. A model is never cute. And so when we talk about machine learning, it's really important. A machine, even though we say learning, the model doesn't know anything. It doesn't have a memory. It doesn't have, it can't think the way that we do. It doesn't, and what this I don't get stuff means, it doesn't understand context. So even though our models are getting better, so you heard, I'm sure you've heard about Dolly, and some of the other big NLP models out there that are getting better and better at writing and responding to things, but they still don't have a context. All they're doing is running statistics on each word to figure out, oh, this combination of words, I should say, I should put this other word after this, and it just keeps going along and doesn't really understand anything. There's a big story right now of a Google engineer saying that their large natural language model is sentient, has consciousness. And of course, Google rightfully, in my opinion, put him on leave to let him maybe not interact with it so much for a bit. And they have come out and said, of course, it is not sentient. It's just a model. We don't know why he's really saying this stuff. It's going to be a long, long time before these models become sentient. And every time that you see that, please take it with a huge grain of salt. Again, maybe some, freak accident actually allows us to jump forward in technology, but most likely nothing is going to become sentient for a long, long time. So a little bit more about what we can use AI for. And this gets into the whole premise of why AI is never going to replace us, at least for a while. It can only be used for simple tasks. Classification is the most of what we use it for right now. And that's what the 0, 1, yes or no, true or false. Sometimes, yes, you can have like a classification of 5, maybe different classifiers that you want to split it in. But typically, we use it for yes or no. We also use it for clustering. Where the most fires in a city happen, or COVID, where it's spreading, how the transmissions are moving. How do we see this stuff moving around the country or hitting certain areas? But even with these simple tasks, we still need human oversight. And the reason why I put in spam, just so you kind of understand, Google retrains its spam filter almost daily. But how many of you have run into issues with Google's spam filter of, either allowing things that you think are spam to still come into your inbox, or you take a look in your spam filter and it's something that you were looking for, but it's sitting in your spam filter, right? And I'm going to ask real quick, and everyone has run into that, right? For the most part.
Got into that last week.
Actually, let me move this over so I'm not looking off camera. So it's not perfect. And even Google, typically when they retrain their model, it can run up to $1 million to $2 million per day for retraining their models. right? So this is huge cost of money, but also what they're trying to do is make sure that they get that spam filter even a 0.1% better than the last time can save millions of emails going into the wrong folder, which in turn makes people either like or dislike Google more, right? So it's worth it to them to constantly do these retrainings to get this right. But you see, it still fails. And spam is considered one of those solved issues in AI. We can't get it any better than we have right now. And because we can only use it for simple tasks, that leaves a lot to be desired. Because think about your job. Is anyone here a network engineer?
Well,
No?
I studied that on university. Well, more telecommunication side, but I see networking.
Okay, so even on the telecommunication side, so think about all the different ways that something could be routed. Now, think about all the different failures that could happen, all the different special cases that could happen in trying to. Yes, network engineers. But networking is a great example of it's something that's so complicated, we really can't use AI for it alone. Can we use, when Facebook went down, right? Exactly with BGP. And we have AI powered routing, and it still fails. Okta getting hacked. Exactly. There's so many things that, yes, the AI could catch some of it, but not the really nuanced things. And why is that? Well, hang on a second. So why can't we use it for anything else besides the simple things? I think I actually have it. Sorry, on the next one. No, I don't. I guess. I was going to talk about. So, as I said before, an AI can't really learn. If you go, let's go back to networking again. If you plug something in the wrong port, and it doesn't work, you kind of learn, oh, yeah, ports are important. I need to make sure that I put something in the right port. Or programming. Yes, I need if, then, else in this order. Once I train an AI, once I train a model, if I want it to learn something new or be able to react on new information, I have to retrain. Yes, why doesn't RJ11 work? Whereas humans, once we've seen something, it flows into our knowledge much quicker. Of course, for some people, they learn faster than others. But for a model, we always have to retrain it. And because of the expense, I may not be able to retrain it for a month, 3 months, 6 months. Most companies cannot spend $1 to $2 million per day retraining their models. I'm trying. My mind just blanked on not McAfee, or maybe it is. Oh no, it is McAfee. So they retrain their models for all the different cybersecurity, but they still don't do it every single day. It's every week. So what kind of So what kind of different attacks could happen in a week's time that could just go completely undetected because that AI, and of course that's what they're going to call it. So we're going to go back to just calling it, AI or model. It's it leaves you vulnerable. And even if you do retrain your model, if you haven't detected an attack or detected even, and let's get outside of an attack, insider threats who, can be just as much of just plain, I don't want to say stupidity. I want to say they just haven't been trained well. So they're doing something on a system that they weren't supposed to, but they don't realize it. That's one of the biggest things that people keep trying to say, oh, we'll use AI for to catch insider threats. But remember, insider threats, a lot of them aren't malicious. They're just dumb mistakes. And it's very hard to train something when you can't think of the mistake itself. And a lot of times it doesn't even get caught in, and, I won't go into the whole, and it's because we're not doing really good monitoring and all that other stuff. But without the data, we can't train a model. So if we're not monitoring things to create the data, then we can't train the model. Exactly. Kevin, exactly. And this really gets back to what I wanted to say and why it won't ever replace you, at least for now, is AI should be looked at as something that augments what we do. And so often you hear vendors talk about how their product, their AI is going to replace people. And it's not going to, or we shouldn't look at it that way. What it will do is allow us to be much more specific with the job that we do. Let's stick with cybersecurity. So in a SOC, yes, there could be thousands of attacks happening per day. The AI should be a good enough product that it captures, let's say, 80% of those attacks, leaving the humans to really look through the other 20. And I know a lot of people will say, well, 20% of 10,000 is still, 2,000 attacks. How's a human going to look through there? Hey, we're never going to be able to look through every single thing, but I can guarantee that there's always a trade-off in costs. So let's start off and say you could get an AI that can catch 70% of all the attacks. And maybe it's $100 a month, just throwing a number out as a service. And then there's going to be the next level. Oh, well, you can catch 80% of the attacks, but it's now $1,000 a month. Oh, sure, we can catch 90, but now it's $10,000 a month, right? So there's going to be a level that at a certain point, a organization just can't pay their way into security. And so we really need to understand what AI can and can't do, and then make sure that the people that we're talking to at, whether it's security, whether you're in a hospital and looking at trying to automate certain things with AI, whether you're in education trying to use AI to grade tests and things like that, it can only do so much. And then you will still have to have a human step in and make sure it's working correctly. And then also identifying where it's making a mistake so that you can go back to the people who are training the models and help them make a better model.
So how do you train AI for like false positives?
Okay, so that is a good question. So, and I didn't want to get too technical, but when you're doing your training, of course you have positive positives, false negatives, and true negatives, right? And so you're trying to minimize your false negatives and your false positives. You're never going to completely do that. What you do, though, is everything is a feature, at least in supervised. And I'm going to keep this to supervised because no matter what you're going to hear out again in the marketing world, most AI today, most of the models that are used out there are supervised models. So think of when you're thinking about training data for a supervised model, think about it just like an Excel spreadsheet. There's columns and there's rows, right? And then the rows are your data and the columns are different features of that data. So you play around with the model and start telling it to weight features differently until you can find which features actually affect the outcome the most. Exactly. And sorry, I was saying exactly to infinite improbability AI. So yeah, your data frame. So you're really trying to find those features that affect it the most, to get that classification or that answer that you're looking for. And, you go from there. But no matter what, you can never get, down to zero your false negatives and false positives.
Identifying, you gotta tell it what is a false positive and start from there, I guess.
Right. So, as you're doing your training, and again, remember, I said, like with supervised, you always have to label your training data. So, going back to spam, so every row you've got spam or you've got ham, right? And you just go down and it's what the model is trying to do is figure out, okay, based upon all the different classifiers that you have, what equals spam and what equals ham. And you can adjust. So let's say in the first iteration, it thinks that anything from no reply at Raices is spam. So, you have to sit there and go, okay, why did it focus on this? And some of that would be taking a look at your training data, maybe all of your training data. You labeled everything from no reply at Raices as spam, right? So that's another thing that is really the most important thing when you're training these models is the data. And you have to make sure that the data fits fits reality, the reality of your situation. So if you were trying to train a spam filter, for instance, it's highly unlikely that your only spam would come from no reply at races.org. So if you would take a look at your data and that was the only thing you had labeled spam, you would know right off the bat, I can't use this. This data does not look like real data. But let's say now you've got 10,000 emails and you've got a bunch of different other things labeled. So then you would start taking a look. Well, maybe you can pick up that the IP address that the email is coming from, everything from this IP address seems to be labeled as spam. Maybe that's the truth. Maybe it's coming from a big spammer. But those are the things that you have to take a look at to try to lessen the false positives and false negatives. And really, what you're trying to do is make sure you're not as worried about the false positives as you are the false negatives. In general, at least the way that I've been trained is you want to minimize the false negatives. The false positives, that's what the humans are there to figure out. Why is that a false positive? But you also want to make that as small a number as possible. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm trying to move that false positive over to the AI side so they can do the work.
Well, and let me and again, some of that can be picked up by AI, but let's say in your SOC you're getting 20. Well, let's say you're getting 100 false positives a day. Maybe you can cut that down to 20. But there's going to be a cost. And can you pay that cost? And even if you can pay that cost to get it down to 20, you're still going to need people to understand, the environment to understand, okay, why is this a false positive? that's the one thing that, we have to get across to leadership, is that AI will never be 100%. AI will probably never be more than 92-ish%, maybe 93. But can your organization afford to pay $1 million or $1 million or $2 million a day to get that 92% accuracy? And for the most part, most organizations couldn't afford $1 or $2 million a year to retrain their models. That's the other thing that I will say, though, is for natural language processing, for Tesla's autopilot and for Siri and for Alexa, yes, it takes a lot of data because language is so complicated, and there's so many different ways to say the same thing, different orders, slang. You have to take into account accents, so many different things. But for a lot of this stuff, you don't need to have millions and millions of lines of data. In fact, there's lots of papers out there that have shown that 10,000 to 100,000 points of data can quite often get in the 85 to 90% range of accuracy. So, again, it's all dependent on the problem that you're trying to solve. Is more data better? Sure, but it is not always necessary. And sometimes it can cause issues if you can't clean the data, if you can't verify where the data has come from, if you can't take the time to label the data. More data can just cause issues. I can understand that one, Max. Alexa has issues with my mom's accent.
Yeah, it's insane. It's racist. You see how much money they put into that training.
Well, and that's always one of the issues. So did they, have they put in the effort to make it better? A thing that we talk about in AI a lot is, AI ethics, AI governance, making sure that the things that are out there actually work for people other than white males. And I always, preface things, so yes, I consider, I have been considered a white male, and I get all the privileges of that, I know. But when I see with my family, like my mom, her accent, I always sit there, and I do have friends at both Apple and Facebook, and I always needle them. I was like, okay, guys, when are you actually going to get some of this training for non-English, people with accents? How are you going to start adding that? But there's a huge cost to it, and a lot of these companies, even though they're making billions, don't want to really spend the additional money it would take. It's only now that they actually have started to, but in the past they just really didn't want to. Yeah, agent. Okay, there are. One of the things with Deloitte, there's an AI academy over in India for Deloitte, and I know that they've been working on some things with making voice assistants work better with the different dialects over there.
Not really so much a question, but I just wanted to make a statement that I've asked many machine learning experts if they've ever come across a validation data set with 100% accuracy rate. They said there are only two circumstances that happens. Number one is when the data isn't that interesting or that complex, or number two, the data scientists messed up somewhere.
Um, so I'm going to be real honest with you guys. I look at AI from a very high standpoint. Like I don't actually go in and build models and stuff. I look at it from a use, an ethics, and a security standpoint. So it's been a while since I've actually sat there and built models. But for the few that I have, and for the friends that's what their day job is, I can verify to you that yeah, there is never a data set that is 100% clean, that is 100% accurate, and that is 100% useful to the question being asked. And remember, that's really important, is that you can't just take data, a huge dump of data. You have to get data that is important to the question that you're trying to get asked or to be asked. A good friend of mine has a real estate valuation company and was building out models, and in talking to him and looking over his models and stuff, there was definitely data that he was pulling into the model that was useless for valuing real estate. And so, I had to point it out. All you're doing is causing more work, because that extraneous data could actually make your model less accurate. And so they went in and made changes, and sure enough, it wasn't affecting it in a huge way, but it was making some effect. So make sure, that the data is important. What am I excited about for the future of AI? That is a hard one, because I don't know if you guys have seen DALL-E. I love the fact that we can train a model to create art, or really to imitate art. Remember, because it's not really creating, or is it? The Librarian of Congress, who puts out rules for patents and copyright, or I'm sorry, not patents, but for copyright, has said that AI cannot own the copyright to any art it generates. Right? And because it's all it's doing is making copies out of all the different information that it had been trained on. The patent office has said AI can't own a patent because it didn't do anything. The humans trained the model, and the humans put forth the question, and the AI is just a tool, right? But this is going to be an interesting question in the next few years. I really, the other thing that I guess the thing I'm excited for the most is for it to make games more realistic, because I hate the bad programming in some games, and allowing a model to actually better simulate what things would do once they're in the middle of a space combat, or playing Fall Guys or something, how the models would react. That to me is the most interesting thing right now. If you're talking about the overall future, AGI, I want to have a robot that can sit there, or not even it has to be a robot. I want Alexa to be able to actually have a conversation with me and understand the context, be able to actually make good inferences and go beyond what we were talking about and bring in other things the way a human does. But yeah, that's not going to happen for a long time. Yes, Kev, I want a robot that cleans my room as well. And will we ever trust AI to check itself? I would put this back. Do we trust humans to check ourselves? I would say for the sensitive things, we don't. We always make sure that there is a second pair of eyes. Why does a pilot go through a checklist? And you can say, well, that's the pilot checking himself or herself, but it's not. The mechanics and the flight crew has already gone over the plane. The pilot is making one last check of everything that should have already been done. So for important things, I don't think that we will ever want an AI to check itself. I know from a military standpoint, I never want an AI to be able to fire on a population. If it, it's really hard. If it can't only be out on a battlefield where there is absolutely no way they're civilians, okay. But that would be a very specific point. But other than that, I will never trust AI just to do most things. But I would say we already have programs that operate automatically. I used to work in the water industry. So all of our water facilities had fail safes built in, and it was all automated based on programs, right? So maybe in certain circumstances, but I don't think that we will get to that point where we will always allow it to just check itself. And with that, I'll end. Yep, I can answer anything. And after this, you guys can always catch me in general chat or anything like that. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, it was actually useful to you. It's such a huge topic, and never knowing exactly where people are in terms of knowing what you know about AI. I usually tend to start at this high level, but I'll ask anything or I'll answer anything that I can, and if I can't, I will find you an answer.
Perfect. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.